Now, I love talking about language with experts like our great friend Kel Richards and my next guest. I've been given the privilege, actually, of writing the foreword for Dr Kevin Donnelly's new book, The Dictionary of Woke, exploring how the left tries to control language and employ groupthink to destroy free speech and rational thought. You can pick this book up through Kevin's website, kevindonnelly.com.au. Kevin joins me now from Melbourne. It's a fantastic book, Kevin, a dictionary of woke. We'll get into some of it in a moment, but there's a really serious point behind this, and anyone who wants to think about it needs to go back and read that most famous of essays by George Orwell, Politics and the English Language, and that is, when you mess with language, you actually do more than change the meaning of words, you change the political debate, you can even change the reality, and we see this happening all the time.
That's very true, Chris, and I taught English for many years. 1984 was one of my favourite books, George Orwell. And the essay you refer to, I'd say everybody should read if they want to learn more about language. And in the novel, you have expressions like war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And what happens, the party, Big Brother, use language to control people, the citizens, to enforce their domination. And as Orwell said, if you control language, you control how people think, how they interact, how they work and live together. So it's a significant issue over the last 20, 30 years that the cultural left, we now talk about being woke, that they're controlling how we think through language.
Well, exactly, and we couldn't ask for a clearer example of that than in the past week. You talk about, George Orwell and war is peace. It sounds too much of a stretch, right? Well, what about inclusion? At the Manly Sea Eagles, inclusion means exclusion. Effectively, inclusion means getting rid of anybody who won't sign up.
There was a Marxist academic some years ago, Marcuse. He actually wrote an essay called Repressive Tolerance. And what he argued is that the left, if they want to overthrow the status quo, if they want to change society, Western culture in particular, then it was okay to be intolerant. It was okay to cancel people. It was okay to deny freedom of speech, freedom of conscience. So the left has used this argument for many years now, and that's why I was so glad last week when a mother who had just given birth actually crossed out birthing parent and said, I'm a mother. And she argued, as others do, Camille Paglia, J.K. Rowling, they argue that women are women. But in our primary schools and kindergartens, they're now teaching kids that boys can be girls, girls can be boys.
Well, when you fly into some countries, they leave a space for you to write in your race. I always write in human. That's the race that counts. Let's go through some of these quite hilarious but disturbing definitions you've got in the Dictionary of Woke. Let's start off with Father's Day and get your comment on that. Father's Day, the definition is it's a phallocentric binary ritual that privileges heterosexuality and the mistaken belief that children need to have a biological father. Alternative descriptions include a non-binary, gender-free Person's Day and a Parents and Carers Day. But this stuff's coming into common usage, isn't it? Carers Day?
It is, and increasingly when I talk to primary teachers, even at that level, instead of celebrating Mother's Day or Father's Day, they talk about Carers Day or a non-binary Person's Day. And government departments, as you know, federal and state, are actually changing pronouns and grammatically incorrect, but they're saying instead of him or her, you can call them they, even if it's singular. So it's madness. We've gone down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland.
Well, let's have a look at another entry that's a particularly Australian one, I think, and that is the missus. I'd be too scared to use that term today, but your definition is a misogynist and patriarchal expression used by husbands to describe their wives. Equally as offensive are descriptions like she who must be obeyed, the old minder one, and the better half. Surely you can get away with better half.
Well, I did actually put that in to get people to laugh and Bill Leak, the great Bill Leak, He talked about using satire and using humour to undercut this cultural left groupthink. And so I put that in. I had to pass it past my wife. She's home doing the cooking, getting dinner ready. Joke. But that's the way it's gone. And, you know, the real issue here, it gets very serious. A lot of young kids at school are being taught toxic masculinity. There was a primary school, a secondary school as well in Sydney and Melbourne, a couple of them, where boys were made to stand up at assembly and apologise for being male. Apparently, Western culture is inherently misogynist, heteronormative, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's just shocking stuff. Let's have a look at partner, your definition for partner, a term once used to describe those working together in business or commerce, but now the preferred gender-neutral term for those who are married or living in a long-term relationship. This does lead to some confusion from time to time.
It's very hard often if you're at a social function or even at a business meeting to really ask that question, you know, are you married? In the day, you could assume there was a certain answer that was all right, but now we have this diversity and difference, inclusion. I looked at some research, and there's research from a survey from La Trobe University that showed that of those surveyed, 98% of Australians were happy being men and women. So the woman who crossed out mother, Sal, I think her name is, she made a very good point that a lot of this sort of cultural left mind control and destroying language is being run by minority groups. It's not mainstream.
No, it's a long way from mainstream. Let's finish off with one more definition. This one, to me, is very toxic. It's actually very racist, and that is white privilege. And your definition says it refers to those of European and Anglo-Celtic descent who are guilty of whiteness, as they are inherently privileged and guilty of oppressing victim groups. As such, they must be re-educated to ensure they atone for their sins, presumably. Look, this is the point. At what point do we, if they're going to blame white people for all the horrible things that some white people have done centuries ago, can we claim the credit too for parliamentary democracy, for civilisation, for science?
We should be able to, and as you know, with the first fleet, I don't call it an invasion because what arrived, there were two books in particular, the King James Bible and laws, the common laws of England. And that's the basis for our Western liberal democracy, why we have the freedoms we do. One good point I'll mention is before the English ministry, the cabinet was dissolved and people were reappointed, the education minister said in England, get rid of the expression white privilege because you're denying kids all around England who are white, often working class, you're denying them the right to get an education. Let's stop talking about race, as Martin Luther King said. Let's talk about character, and in that sense, we're all equal.
Yeah, there's plenty of white kids are disadvantaged as well, and we're the poor white trash of Asia, aren't we, as Australians? Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Congrats on the book. It's going to be a ripper. I think everyone's going to have to buy it because without it, their kids probably won't get through school or certainly university. There you go, Dr Kevin Donnelly there, The Dictionary of Woke. You can get it now via his website.